Madam Clerk, are we ready? Okay, thank you. Call the meeting to order. Do I have someone in the meeting to do an opening prayer? Mr. Johnson? Thank you.
Creator, we ask for your guidance in this meeting as we work together to nurture the bonds of community for all the residents of the Northwest Territories. We are thankful for our presenters today. We are thankful for all of us gathering today, and we ask you to help any of the families going through loss at this time. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Next item under review of adoption of the agenda. Is any additions or changes to the agenda? Hearing no changes to the agenda, can I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Mr. Bonatush, thank you. As moved the adoption of the agenda, reviewed and adopt the agenda. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Hearing none, thank you, committee. We'll start our meeting. Indicate ready to live. Good morning. I now call this meeting of the Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment to order. My name is Jackie Jacobson. I'm the MLA for Nunavut. I'm the chair of the Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment. Today we'll receive a public briefing about the government supports for the remediation economy. Representatives from the government, Northwest Territories, Department of Industry, Tourism and Investment, Environment of Climate Change, Education, Culture and Employment. Please note the meeting is being live streamed. I'd like to remind all members and presenters to direct your questions and comments to myself as the chair, and we'll wait to be recognized before speaking to help this meeting run smooth. I'll now ask members to introduce themselves for the record.
Alan Johnson, MLA for Yellowknife North. Thank you, everyone.
Ron Bondatrus, MLA Decho. Good morning.
Trina Knockleby, MLA for Great Slave. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you.
Caitlin Cleveland, MLA Cam Lake. Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, thank you. Now I'll pass it over to the officials for the government of Northwest Territories to introduce themselves and proceed with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Menzie McEachern, and I'm Assistant Deputy Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources with the Department of Industry, Tourism and Investment, and I'll pass it over to my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Good morning. My name is Julian Kennigan. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister for Environmental Management, Monitoring and Climate Change with the Department of Environment and Climate Change.
Good morning, Michael Saturnino. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister of Labor and Income Security with the Department of Education, Culture and Employment.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Russell Hossain, Regional Director, Contaminants and Remediation Division, Saranac, Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you. You may proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks for joining us today, everyone, both from Standing Committee as well as anyone else dialing in online. Today, I'd like to speak to you about our supports for NWT businesses and residents in the remediation economy. Next slide, please. So just an outline of what I intend to cover today, and then we'll have plenty of time, hopefully, for questions after the presentation, although just to warn you, it is a fairly detailed presentation, so it will take us a bit of time to get through this. Firstly, we'll talk about what is the remediation economy, some background on the concept, and some sharing of research or analysis that's been done on the anticipated NWT labor and training needs in this remediation economic space in the years ahead. Then I'll dive into what is SPI, meaning Strategic Partnership Initiative, and that is a funding program that we are using to help implement remediation economic capacity building activities, and GNWT and the Government of Canada have been working together in that regard, so we'll cover that. And then given this is a GNWT briefing today, we will cover some of the GNWT roles in detail in this space. Then we'll move into the current work we're doing, the current phase we're in of this work in terms of preparing residents for remediation economic opportunities and training partnerships, skills development programs implemented or will be implemented at Aurora College, enhanced business capacity or building business capacity, which is being led by a contractor named Catalyst Plus. We'll touch on the giant mine remediation project, which many of you have heard about before in earlier briefings and venues, and which is the largest remediation project that we have in the territory at present, and hopefully for the foreseeable future. And then finally, we'll cover some next steps, the go-forward work for the remediation economy. Next slide, please. All right, so first some background. In the NWT, we have more than 500 sites that are expected to require assessment, remediation, and or long-term monitoring activities. And while many of these sites are related to past resource sector activity, predominantly mining activity, they cut across many sectors of the economy. Now, these sites are the responsibility of a number of different organizations, including the Government of Canada, the GNWT, as well as individual companies. And successful closure and remediation of these sites will require the collaboration of governments, Indigenous governments and organizations, northern Indigenous businesses, and of course, northern workers. A coordinated approach to developing the capacity of northern Indigenous employees and businesses really is essential. And so, in this regard, a strategic partnership initiative was identified to ensure that Indigenous communities, NWT residents and businesses benefit. With an anticipated downturn in diamond mine employment and opportunities in the coming years, the remediation and management of contaminated sites could help offset some of the negative economic impacts to our NWT workers and businesses from the expected diamond mine closures. That said, we of course do hope that there will be additional mines to come to the fore to replace our diamond mines in the years ahead, including not just diamonds, but gold and critical minerals mines. It should be noted that current resource sector projects require securities to cover closure and reclamation costs. And many projects do progressive reclamation, i.e. reclamation before they close. So that what this means is that the current backlog of historic contaminated sites that are essentially public liabilities represent yes, a remediation economic opportunity, but perhaps a one-time opportunity because we really hope not to see these types of public liabilities in the future. Next slide, please. So over the next 30 years, estimated remediation economic expenditures are anticipated in the NWT to be above $4.8 billion. Remediation will support as many as 700 full-time equivalent positions per year for approximately the next 15 years, although it should be noted that there is some seasonal variation to this work. The annual spend is anticipated to be around $291 million per year over the next 15 years, generating approximately $151 million in GDP for the NWT per year in that time frame. Now, it should be noted that most of this economic activity will be in the North Slave region. And that's because historically, the North Slave region has been a hub of mining activity, as we know. It's also the region with our largest remediation project, as I mentioned, the Giant Mine Remediation Project. Next slide, please. So here you can see the timelines of a number of different remediation projects forecast over the next 15 years or so. You can see the Giant Mine Remediation Project being our largest, which is currently planned to go until 2038. Other key projects are up on screen. Great Bear Lake is a really significant one, and you can see that the diamond mine remediation projects on the bottom are extending out over this time period as well, with De Beers Snap Lake already happening, Rio Tinto Diavik happening in the coming years, and then further out looking at Gotcho and Acadie. Again, though, the diamond mines are progressively reclaiming, so the scale or the scope after closure will not be as large as, say, something that we're looking at from the past, like Giant Mine. There is also, I should note, after remediation work is complete, some long-term monitoring activities at these sites. Now, admittedly, the economic sort of benefits associated with the long-term monitoring are very small, but it is something worth noting. Next slide, please. Many of the labor market needs in remediation work mirror those of the mining and infrastructure sectors writ large. So same types of jobs. A remediation economy would consist of business services and labor to support the care and maintenance, assessment, closure, remediation, and monitoring activities associated with abandoned, contaminated, or closing mine or industrial and infrastructure sites. Associated services or labor categories are quite variable, but these can include job types like environmental scientists, engineers, technicians, hydrologists, heavy equipment operators, drillers, excavators, laborers, as well as administrative and project management support staff. About 40% of the labor will need post-secondary education and training. So this is a key point. Next slide, please. So what is the Strategic Partnership Initiative program that I briefly mentioned before? SPI was identified as a funding opportunity for remediation economy, training and labor market preparedness programming. It was originally launched in 2010, and it's a CERNAC program. It works to increase Indigenous participation in large, complex, multi-year economic opportunities that span a range of sectors. Since 2010, more than 400 Indigenous communities have benefited from SPI funding, either directly or indirectly. And 223 partnerships have been created based on SPI investments across Canada. SPI promotes partnerships between federal and non-federal governments and groups in key economic areas. It's an ongoing process with a current annual budget of $14.5 million. It bridges funding gaps and is not intended to be the sole funder of initiatives, so it definitely seeks to leverage funding and resources through its activity. It supports investments in economic readiness, economic infrastructure, expanding viable businesses, pre-feasibility and feasibility studies for projects, environmental diagnostics and evaluations, community economic development planning, as well as skills development and training. So, who's eligible for SPI funding? Indigenous businesses and organizations are, JV partnerships are eligible, Indigenous governments and communities, academic institutions, as well as provincial and territorial governments. Next slide, please. I think a slide was skipped there. Could you go back to GNWT and Government of Canada collaboration? Slide A, GNWT. Okay, so somehow we're missing a slide. That's okay, I'll speak to it if people don't mind. All right. Oh, wait, there it is. Oh, she got it, okay. All right, CERNAC, NWT region, and the GNWT have been working together to advance the concept of this remediation economy since 2021. And I always like to add the caveat that it's not an economy into and of itself. It's a part of a project life cycle. And so therefore it's not something that we can hang our hats on as the the lifesaver of the NWT economy, but it is a real economic opportunity that is worthy of our attention. So since 2021, the two governments have been working together on this. Phase one of this work involved the analysis of the economic opportunities associated with contaminated site assessment, remediation, and monitoring. And CERNAC developed an opportunity profile which outlined a framework for SPI investment, and that described the emerging remediation economy in the NWT. Meanwhile, GNWT wrote a discussion paper that characterized the extent of potential economic opportunities associated with contaminated sites assessment, remediation, and long-term monitoring projects in the territory. Then moving into phase two, that involved further analysis of these economic opportunities and a full application to the Strategic Partnership Initiative, which was approved. And as part of that application, Made in the North Action Plan was developed, and this document outlined two main areas for program delivery. The first area was a stream for skills development for individual workers and training. And the second stream is to develop business capacity. And that work also described the opportunity in more detail and how to address gaps in Indigenous skills development as well as business capacity. GNWT also did some initial or some additional analysis and revised the cost estimates for remediation project spend in the years ahead in the territory, including updated giant mine remediation project cost estimates. And that is dynamic. That sort of work will need to continue because these sorts of estimates do change over time, and then there will be new projects that as they get clarified in terms of their scope of work, will need to be incorporated into our project cost estimates, including, for example, Imperial Norman Wells. Now, we've also done a survey on the remediation economy to help inform implementation activities. And then another thing that's happening right now in phase 3, which is our current phase, is increased coordination and moving forward with funding applications. So we have created a GNWT Government of Canada Remediation Economy Coordination Committee. All of us at this table sit on that committee. It's an ADM director level committee. And that committee it was created by us to share and exchange information between the partners and communicate with all relevant parties on a regular basis, and to identify collaboration opportunities and best practices in the years ahead on this file. And all of the, let's call them the government departments and agencies that have specific training and labor force preparation programs are on the committee or are welcome to join the committee, given that it is a sort of coordination venue on these types of programs. And phase 4, of course, is moving into implementation of the funded programs. Next slide, please. I'd like to speak a bit more on GNWT involvement in the remediation economy, given this is a GNWT briefing today. And there are 3 GNWT departments involved in this file. Firstly, ITI is our GNWT lead on the remediation economy file. And I, of course, am with ITI. As the lead, ITI is co-chairing the Remediation Economy Coordination Committee with CERNAC. And we have at ITI done some of our own analysis on this work in coordination with others. For example, we analyzed Parsons procurement processes and performance at GMRP, Parsons being the main construction manager of GMRP. And it was agreed fairly recently that ITI would lead the remediation economy file, given that we are the primary department responsible for economic development and diversification in the territory, and that we seek to maximize economic benefits to Northerners from economic development in the territory. ECE is closely involved in this work, and Mike Saturnino here is with ECE. Their role is in labor force capacity building and training, and their mandate focuses on early childhood to post-secondary education and relates to the remediation economy file, as much of its focus is on educating and preparing residents for future job or broader economic opportunities. And EC also has a role across the Northwest Territories in coordinating regional training partnerships, as well as providing workforce supports. And this will be further discussed in the coming slides. It says E&R on the slide. My apologies, I should have updated that because they are now Environment and Climate Change with a merger with the Department of Lands. And ECC is the project lead on the Giant Mine Remediation Project, co-lead with Canada. And ECC has a unit dedicated to the Giant Mine Remediation Project, as well as a division focused on environmental protection and waste management. Also, we'll discuss these roles in the coming slides. And our Remediation Economy Coordination Committee is responsible for the high-level oversight and coordination, communication around these activities. And we're all ADM level on that committee at the GNWT side of things. Next slide, please. So let's get into a little bit of the meat and potatoes on the SPI program applications and the go forward work there. So the phase 3, the funding programs are basically starting this fiscal year in 2023-2024. And with this work, our coordination committee is holding regular meetings until these programs are firmly established and underway. And we'll manage any issues that may arise and coordinate communications as this work goes forward. First of all, on the skills development side of things, Aurora College submitted an application to develop 2 training programs for SPI funding, which I'll cover in the coming slides. And then also ECE is coordinating the North Slave Regional Training Partnership, which will also seek SPI funding, as well as delivery of ECE labor market programs to support workforce needs. On the business capacity development side, excuse me, Catalyst Plus has applied for SPI funding to support the enhancement of Indigenous participation and Indigenous business participation in major remediation economic opportunities in the territory. Next slide, please. So I'm going to steal the thunder a little bit from my ECE and ECC colleagues to dive into their work. So if I get anything wrong, they can correct me later. Here we're going to talk about ECE's role in supporting the remediation economy. First of all, the regional training partnerships that have existed in every region of the NWT, it should be noted, though, that not all of these regional training partnerships are fully functioning. So there's room for some improvements here. Partners and stakeholders in the regional training partnerships include Aurora College, Indigenous skills and employment training holders, training organizations, and regional ECE service centers. As part of the Giant Mine Remediation Project, ECE was asked to take the lead on reestablishing the North Slave Regional Training Partnership, and this also included creating the North Slave Regional Training Hub, which was a new online marketplace, or is a new online marketplace for training organizations, workforces, coordinating funding sources, or informing folks on these funding sources, as well as project owners and the GNWT, giving project owners and the GNWT the opportunity to partner to coordinate on employment needs for large-scale projects in the North Slave region. This North Slave Regional Training Partnership and the corresponding hub have been developed to support trainers and funding responses to these large-scale projects. And as part of the GNWT application to SPI, the intent is to expand these partnerships to support or focus on the remediation economic opportunities. The lead for these regional training partnerships are the regional ECE service centers. And they're responsible for delivery as well of the ECE labor market programs. These labor market programs offer supports to individuals who are supported in assessing training and skills development or accessing training and skills development initiatives to assist them in meeting their goals, as well as they're available to employers or organizations who can access the programs to hire and retain staff or support their employees' access to training. Also, these supports are available to individual communities to address their specific local labor market needs. Next slide, please. Aurora College is seeking to use the SPI funding based on the Remediation Opportunities Action Plan I previously mentioned to address the skills development gaps of remediation projects, specifically northern skills development gaps. Two key skills development programs have emerged as critical for remediation projects based on an analysis of our current labor supply in the NWT, our labor force needs, and these skills development gaps. The first one proposed here is the Northern Technical Program. This training program, which will be at Aurora College or Polytechnic going forward, is to train our Northerners in the fields of project management technician, safety technician, quality assurance technician, and quality control technicians. A second program, which will be called the Northern Remediation Monitoring Program, will build our workers' capacity in the environmental monitoring field, which is specifically designed for remediation and reclamation environmental monitoring. Next slide, please. On the business side of things, Catalyst Plus has applied for funding to enhance Indigenous business capacity for these major remediation economic opportunities. Catalyst Plus is a contractor to engage with Indigenous leadership. Examples include with the Calicho, Yellowknives Dene First Nation, Sahtu communities, members of the North Slave Métis Alliance, and of course there could be other Indigenous groups going forward in this mix. And they intend to match staff from the Indigenous Economic Development Corporations with Catalyst Plus expert advisors, and will connect Indigenous business participants to other regional supports that are available. So, what do these advisors do at Catalyst Plus? They develop tailored mentorship plans, and they'll work one-on-one with individuals or small groups within the Indigenous Development Corporations for 6 to 12-month periods to address current project or business needs. Examples include procurement capacity building and training, project management capacity building and training, business basics, or, crash courses on things like Mining 101 or Closure 101. Next slide, please. So, in looking at environment and climate change's role in the Giant Mine Remediation Project, it's co-managed, as I touched on, with Government of Canada. And Parsons, the main construction manager for the GMRP, is responsible for the majority of the hiring and contracting associated with GMRP. The remediation activities began in the summer of 2021, although of course there was a lot of planning leading up to that. And 2022-2023 saw quite an overhaul in project design, which led to increased cost estimates for GMRP. The updated cost estimate is $4.38 billion, and the new timeline expected is that the remediation work will continue until at least 2038. The upside of this extended timeline is that it will allow for greater northern participation and benefits in the project. Next slide, please. So thanks for bearing with me through this fairly long presentation. I would like to finish off here before we get to questions on next steps for this file. So we have, as I mentioned, the GNW Team Canada working together on the Remediation Economy Coordination Committee, and it's an open door there for those for organizations that are interested in engaging with that committee and to learn more or to share as well their own work in this space. Always looking for opportunities for a broader tent. And so we would like to exchange information between partner agencies and communicate with all relevant parties on a regular basis. Continue to identify best practices that can be integrated into implementation activities, and to facilitate collaboration across organizational and government lines. We're currently meeting monthly as a committee to stay on top of the SPI programming until those are nicely launched. And we may move to quarterly meetings afterwards if things are running smoothly. That said, we can always look at meeting frequency depending on the needs of a particular time or initiative. And we are planning to create a sort of longer-term roadmap for remediation economy activities, in other words, updating the original action plan, to ensure there's a collective understanding on timelines, deliverables, and key performance indicators. And having some performance metrics will allow us to make changes to implementation activities or improvements as we go forward based on things we learn along the way. We'll continue to play a role in the months or years ahead in terms of looking at applications and funding provided to successful applications to better coordinate the implementation of those activities and programs. All right, turning to the final slide, which is the opportunity for questions. And thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for giving us this opportunity to present on this exciting file today.
Jackie, I think you're frozen. Can you hear us? I'll step in and chair. Absent there are no objections. Are there any questions or comments from committee?
Me, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, MLA Knockleby.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for the presentation. My apologies for not being there in person. My comments are just around, I guess, sort of duplication of effort, and I guess I'm a bit concerned about the lag in doing all of this work without actually getting people trained up and ready for these jobs in time to profit off of it or to benefit from it. So I guess my first comment is around the remediation technology program, and I said this at the other presentation that we had, was that to me it's just a rebranded environmental technician program. And really, I don't see that people would be limiting themselves to just being, say, a remediation technologist when they could do envirotech and have a lot more sort of diversification of skills. And then I guess my other comment is that when I listen to all of this, we already have people working in the territory that are doing the work that the government is talking about. And that's places like the Mine Training Society, which does a lot more than just mining. And so I guess my question is, why not just fund those groups in a greater capacity, hire people there, they're already set up, ready to go, they already have the relationships, et cetera, and give them the rebrand to actually what they are doing, which is much further than just mining work. They do all of that sort of career mapping programs, that type of thing. So I'm concerned that this is just the government reinventing the wheel and getting bogged down and get another ADM and director committee, where really there's people that could just be, if they were adequately funded with core multiple year funding, they could be doing the job that you're proposing here. And I guess my question is that consultant group that's coming in to work with Indigenous people, are they from the outside of the territory? Thank you.
Jackie, I'll pass the chair back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Rylan. Go ahead. Answer the question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just if I could, Mr. Chair, we have subject matter experts from each of our different departments and organizations here. So I'd like to ask Michael Saturnino to take this question from Education, Culture and Employment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Saturnino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regards to the question around the Mine Training Society, so the Mine Training Society is engaged in this type of work presently on the Giant Mine Remediation Project. They've been involved in much of the planning and action planning that was being done on GMRP. They do have a relationship directly with Parsons as the main construction manager. And I believe even recently Parsons has joined the Mine Training Society board as well. So they're very closely connected to the work. Mine Training Society are presently going to be going through a bit of strategic planning of their own, where they're going to look at the future direction of the organization. So we anticipate that is an activity I believe that they're accessing some dollars from Canor to undertake. To this point, MTS has been very focused on the mining, on mineral activities, predominantly around the large diamond mines. They have over time discussed expanding or diversifying their approach to include remediation as we enter into this area. So there is a little bit of work to be done by MTS to prepare themselves to enter into this area, but they are engaged in it, and we look forward to continuing to work with MTS to advance training initiatives. They've been supporting NWT residents and economic activities for the past 20 years, and we hope to see further success from them. With regards to the, don't know if I could speak to the Aurora College programs. The programs are, although they may be seen as a rebrand, they are necessary. It was something I believe that came out of some of the preliminary work that was led by Canada and the GNWT. We clearly need to have programs available to support residents. Yeah, as I mentioned, I think that we just need to continue working with our partners to build capacity so that they can explore these types of opportunities in the future. With regards to the business piece around Catalyst, I will perhaps hand that back to Russell, or ask Mr. Chair if you could direct that question to Russell. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Trinino. Herself.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Catalyst, like they have long experience working closely with the community. It is old Queso, and now it is Catalyst Plus. But what we are doing, we are trying to identify the community. Right now, Delane-Gotene government is part of the pilot project. So we'll be working closely with the Delane government through Catalyst, and it is a pilot project. We want to learn. The goal is to develop the workforce strategy, community development, and business development so that they can be part of the overall remediation economy, implementing the Great Bear Lake project. Again, overall goal to maximize the economic benefit within the community, and we want to identify the gaps. We want to build their skills, and that's why Catalyst have applied through SPI, and Canor is working on the agreement, and we have very clear work plan that how we want to work closely with the Delane government. We met with the leadership team, and we provided the proposed work plan that how next 3 years should evolve, and how we can see that the modern treaty government working closely as our government partner would be part of this remediation economy. So based on that, we understand that next 2 years, Delane government would be our pilot. Then we want to expand to, as from our presentation, that we want to expand overall Northwest Territories, identifying that where the key development opportunities are. And we are also working closely with multiple partners to understand that where the skill gaps and how Government of Canada can help them to address those gaps so that it can, again, like help workforce strategy, community development, and business development. Marcy.
Thank you for that. Next on the list, I have for
Jackie, don't I get a
Ms.
second question?
Knockleby. Yeah, you do. I was just going to call you. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. So no response to my answer or question about the multi-core year funding for MTS, but I'll leave that. I want to respond to what sorry, I didn't catch names earlier on, but the fellow from Cernak said. That's great. I do think that Indigenous governments need to have capacity building done within their communities, and I really think that I hope part of this work would definitely be a transfer of skills, not just helping them with this business, but also helping them to create positions within their own governments that then can continue on with the economic development type work. But my question was also not answered. So I don't think that, is this a person from, or a company from the South? And I have to ask, because yet again, it's Southerners coming in to work with Northerners. I think it's great that Canada is backing this, but why are our consultants and our people that work often with Indigenous people in the North who already have those relationships, and I'm not talking about what the GNWT loves to do by hiring their ex-buddies down in Kelowna, I'm talking about true people that are embedded in our communities. And to me, it's a real shame to see that, yet again, we're not bringing and using our Northern people and building their capacities in these roles as well. So I guess that's more of a comment. I do find this to not be, this just feels like a repeat of the other presentation that we had. And I really don't think that this is is going to do anything in the 15-year timeframe that Giant Mine has been laid out for. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Knockleby. Next on the list, I have Mr. O'Reilly.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I guess I think this sort of effort on a remediation economy kind of got off on the wrong foot. In April of 2020, the federal government announced a big program to help the Western provinces try to stimulate their economy by giving them a bunch of money for abandoned oil and gas wells, and we wanted to try to get some of that, but the way it was kind of termed and pitched to the federal government was some sort of bailout for the resource sector at the time, and it really didn't go anywhere, and that was a a real missed opportunity. And I guess I had hoped that it would be pitched as kind of an accelerated contaminated sites remediation program with the federal government. But okay, we're where we are now. I think I heard that there's some kind of an action plan that's been developed, and maybe I asleep at the wheel, and I don't recall actually ever having seen that. And the remediation economy is one of the themes that this committee identified as something that we wanted to dig into and maybe even develop a report around. So if there's some kind of an action plan that's been developed either jointly or individually by the GNWT, is that something that can be shared with this committee? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly. Mr. Saturnino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the action plan was part of the SBI application, and it can be shared. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I think that would be helpful in the work that committee's already started on this. So, and unfortunately, it would have been nice to have had some, I guess maybe some of it's been integrated into the presentation, but I don't really sense that there's a clear sort of set of goals, objectives, targets that have been identified. Are there specific targets, measures of success in terms of benefit retention? Are we looking to, capture more benefits from remediation, whether it's government-led or private sector-led? Do we have specific targets around employment, contracting, spending in northern communities for, Indigenous peoples or, resident Northerners? Is any of that in this action plan? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly. Mr. Saturnino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Mr. McEachern, or Dr. McEachern over here, but anyway, so regarding the idea of goals, targets, and then, related to that would be performance metrics. That's something as a coordination committee we can look at in terms of a longer term roadmap, and so that taking the action plan as a foundation and then looking at, okay, so what would this look like longer term? What are some things we want to achieve goal-wise, and how to measure those, and how to communicate on those as well with folks that are interested in this file. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Saturnino. Mr. Dr. McEachern, sorry about that. Would you like to add anything?
No, that's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next on the list, I have Miss Cleveland. Caitlin?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. I guess further to what MLA O'Reilly was just asking, I'd like to ask for another kind of reporting or looking at this from another perspective. And while this presentation focused a lot on the training aspect, which is important. One of the things that has already been said is we do have people in the territory right now who can do this work, and what it ends up coming down to is the procurement process. And so I'm wondering if within the remediation economy in the Northwest Territories, if that reporting will not just speak to dollars, but also what dollars are leaving the territory, so that we as a territory have an understanding about what niches of work are going to Southern proponents. And so whether or not that is specific to a certain industry is very valuable for businesses to understand. So I'm going to kind of break this down and leave that right there as my first question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Cleveland. Mr. Dr. McEachran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some analysis has been done in this regard to identify the types of skills needed in remediation projects, at the individual level and at the business level, and then to look at where these gaps are, and that's ongoing, of course, in terms of really wanting to fill the gaps in that capacity at the individual and the business level. And frankly, there's work outside or beyond the remediation specific topic, because again, we call it a remediation economy, but really we have to do whatever we can to maximize northern benefits with all kinds of economic activity, but there's related work that also can be built on here. So, for example, we have socioeconomic agreements with our major resource projects, and so we have been conducting a review of the socioeconomic agreement program, as well as developing regulations under the Mineral Resources Act, including on the topic of benefits. So those are happening simultaneously. And it's really important work, because part of it is certainly looking at how can we improve the data we collect through implementation of socioeconomic agreements. And that, will go a long way to inform our implementation activities for, socioeconomic agreements, and it would inform implementation activities specific to remediation projects as well. And that improved data will really help us, zero in on, okay, what are the key areas where we need to build labor capacity development and business capacity development in both remediation as well as broader resource or infrastructure sector for Northerners to maximize those benefits. And it's ultimately comes down to that. And as we all know around this table, that is one of the key mandate priorities of this government, is to focus on Northern benefits maximization. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ms. Cleveland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And what I'm hearing is kind of a long-term goal of filling gaps and information and data building. And what I'm asking for is essentially for the GNWT to kind of flip that around and look at this from a transparency and accountability perspective, so that we have an annual reporting of what dollars are leaving the territory and why they're leaving the territory, so that business operators can say, okay, this niche market over here, the dollars from here are leaving the territory. Why are they leaving the territory? Is it that my bids are too high, or is it that no one is providing bids on this work? So all of a sudden, business owners can look at this and say, okay, all of the work for this one type of work is leaving the territory. So there's a territorial niche market here that has room to be filled, and people can actually go after that work specifically. And so I'm not looking at this from a data compiling or information gathering perspective for a long-term plan or action plan for the GNWT. I'm looking at this from an accountability and transparency mechanism for the government to be accountable for the dollars it's spending and the money that it is spending on remediation that is then leaving the territory, so that we're all, as whether it's residents or public servants, and not at the ADM level, not at the director level, but the people who are, at the program level, who are fulfilling those contracts and carrying out this work along with the business community, can be accountable to the dollars that they are providing to Southern businesses. So will the GNW, I guess I'm looking for a commitment from the GNW to report on what niche markets contracts are leaving the NWT and why they're leaving the NWT. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Cleveland. Dr. McEachran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Specifically on the topic of the remediation economy, and even more specifically the giant mine remediation project, the work that the member is requesting is actually something that we have done for the giant mine remediation project. We looked at the categories of contracts. Well, we looked at procurement by Parsons, the main construction manager of GMRP, and looked at the types of work or contracts that were going south. You know, things included air quality monitoring, medical work, materials sourcing, such as lime, sulfate, dust suppressants, some drilling work, the installation of specialized equipment, such as water pumps and thermosiphons, as well as some of the construction work. So that's one example of that type of analysis. Admittedly, it's quite a lot of work to do that, like it was in that case for just that portion of the giant mine remediation project, i.e. the Parsons work that they manage. And so for the remediation economy writ large, I mean, it's certainly something we can further discuss and look at our capability in continuing with that type of ongoing analytical and reporting capability. I can't, though, make a commitment on the behalf of GNWT in that regard as I'm sitting here in the hot seat today. But it's definitely something we can look at. And yeah, we'll take that away. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. McEachran. Next on the list, Mr. Bonatrush. You're muted, Ron.
Yeah, Mussy, Mr. Speaker, and Mussy to the presenters. Regarding the anticipated labor training needs, like for environmental sciences, we may have, students, or we could really be encouraging students, especially a lot in the Indigenous communities that I've always tried to encourage, at least to get into a 2-year civil engineering technology program that's either offered in NAIT or SAIT. And something like this could really feed into that, to that hunger to improve education in the community. So it hits a lot of areas here. And to encourage our youth to pursue these avenues in education and to further their education, I just can't harp on that enough. Because you're looking at environmental sciences, and I'm, I see lots of techs that work with engineering departments in the GNWT that are just coming out of school, or you can use them as summer students. That's gives them a taste for that area. Also for heavy equipment operation, and I spoke to this many times, we have a HEO program. We send a lot of students from our small communities. And they come back here and there's lack of jobs. The only ones they would get is highways, and they're always full. And with the private contractors, you need at least 5 years experience. These type of jobs, the training, would fit very well for our graduates for the HEO programs where they run, a lot of different equipment. And administrative and project management support, we got the Aurora College, which has office admin or business management programs. It could feed into a lot of these things. So I'm wondering if maybe you could answer, maybe comment on some of the stuff that I brought up, Mussy.
Mr. Chair, you with us?
Can't hear you, Jackie.
Can you hear me now? Okay, yeah, thank you. You could answer that, Dr. McEachern. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask Mike Saturnino to take this one, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Saturnino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As MLA Bonnet Rouge touched on a number of areas with regards to post-secondary program, encouraging youth into careers, and some of the other opportunities. A lot of this does tie into existing work that ECE has ongoing. So we do have, under our Skills for Success initiative, labor market information, you know, to the year 2040, which does include some of these projections. We do know that we have a need to encourage more people into specific occupations in demand. We do know that we have a need to encourage youth to participate and you know, attend post-secondary, looking to pursue some of these opportunities. We have been doing a number of things in ECE around touching on these. So, you know, in schools, we do have our career and education advisors that are providing direct support to students. So helping them, you know, explore what careers they may want to enter into, talking about what courses they're taking, trying to ensure that when a student exits the school system, they've taken the right courses and they can enter post-secondary and don't have to get themselves back into a cycle of upgrading, either in the high school or at Aurora College. We've also, you know, have been undertaking a review of the student financial assistance program that we hope to launch very shortly for the upcoming school year, that will see extra supports for post-secondary students and the removal of some of the barriers associated with that as well. Yeah, I mean, I think that we, you know, there's a sort of touches on a number of different areas that we've already identified and we are working on, but there's more work to be done, and we find that our greatest success tends to be in working in partnership with Indigenous governments, other training providers, Aurora College, and so we also have regional training partnerships in every region to look at what the local needs are and try to find opportunities to collaborate and deliver some joint training. So it's not only territorially that we're doing certain things, but also looking at it at a regional and local level as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Bonnet Rouge?
Yeah, must see Mr. Chair, and must see Mr. Saturnino. Sounds familiar, but the ECE always chimes in about. Because I don't see anybody talking about the remediation economy and the whole of the territories. I don't see anybody going into the schools to discuss that and to say, hey, these are all, you know, the positions that are going to be required. Because I don't see that anywhere else. I don't see that within ECE either myself. I don't see that. That's why I'm saying something like this, you know, can really benefit people. You go out into the schools and try to promote getting people into these positions. Like he talks about it just territorially. I don't know what we've got for Southern. And I'm not sure if this remediation economy is just geared towards giant mine only, because that comes up a lot. You know, I don't know what capabilities they're looking at, really. I'm not sure if they're even, you know, sincere about what they want to do. Because I see that Strategic Partnership Initiative, the SPI, which was launched in 2010. That's quite some time ago. I'm not sure if there are any reports that the public can see as to see what has been done in that area. Because it says more than 400 Indigenous communities have benefited. and partnerships have been created. What are the indigenous population or stats that you use here, whether they're labor or with First Nations? What capacity do they bring to the table? Masi.
Thank you, Mr. Bonchuj. Dr. McEachran or Mr. Chatinier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll ask Russell Hussain to speak to the background on the strategic partnership initiative and potentially learning about the performance of that program.
Yeah. So again, strategic partnership initiative, it is Canada-wide initiative, and we have director general committee from all over the Canada, and we try to understand that where the needs were, the gaps. And our RDG, Matthew Spence, like he was the champion to launch the Remediation Economy Partnership initiative. And that's where the three pillars we identified part of strategic partnership initiative, which will be launched in next 3 years, made in North to address the remediation economy. And as we mentioned that the key target of the strategic partnership initiative is to work closely with our indigenous partners, work closely with our business and tradespeople to make sure that we can maximize the benefits. And that's why we see that it's a great opportunity under strategic partnership initiative, which we have secure fund for next 3 years and +2. So we have to actually like show progress. And why we are focusing on remediation economy, like again, we are estimating that it's huge opportunity, $4.8 billion plus. And at the same time, through the strategic partnership initiative, we can learn and we can tell the story. And next 30 years, probably like it would be expanded. And the goal from Canada is to there's a strategic partnership initiative that next 3 to 5 years program or this remediation economy 3 initiatives, it won't be guaranteed. So the goal is to transfer the overall skills to our government partner GNWT so that like they can take it from there. And then that's where remediation coordination committee will work together and figure out that what are the lessons learned and how we can apply those learnings and initiatives in broader picture so that we don't want to miss the opportunity in the north. Marcy.
Yeah, thank you for that. Mr. Bonchuj, you have a follow-up with that?
I'm okay, because I'm not getting any answers anyways, Masi.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Mr. Bonchuj. Any other members have any other questions for the panel or the...
Hi, it's Jane Wayne Armstrong here.
Yeah, go ahead, Jane.
Yes, I apologize for signing in late, but reading through this, and they are right that there's like a lot of like even from my region, there's a lot of people that benefited from the employment at the mine, you know. And it's good, you know, because they provided a lot of jobs and they provided housing. They helped the community, you know, not just here, but you know, in the northern communities that we lack a lot of jobs, and that's why we're supporting a lot of. We would like to see a lot of jobs decentralized back to the small communities because we're thinking about life after mining here too. And I just want to ask, I know that the mine, when they first opened up, they were, because a lot of our young people entered trades, and a lot of them went into truck driving, because a lot of truck drivers were needed at that time when they first opened in the 90s. now I just want to ask, how many other trades have they produced? Like, I haven't heard much about trades in plumbing, carpenter, electrician, millwrights, all the other trades that these young people can use after the mine closed, like the RIT seals I'm talking about. How many of the indigenous youth benefited from the trades program, from the apprenticeship? And I know there's few that I know of, personally, that I know there are some that benefited from the mining with the trades program, but I just want to know in general, how many indigenous youth benefited from the mining industry, especially with trades? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wellen Armstrong. Dr. McEachran or Mr. Saturnino?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that we are in the midst of an SEA program review and will be redesigning the socioeconomic agreement program. And part of that is definitely getting better and more specific data from the mines or other resource sector projects that have socioeconomic agreements. And when I say better data, that includes down to the roles of specific trades, specific job types within the mines, so that we can really see, where things are going well in terms of large or high percentage participation of Northerners in those roles versus where the gaps are. And I think good programming in general starts with good data, i.e. understanding what's the reality, what's happening. And so this will definitely inform more focused, more targeted programs to fill those skills gaps for Northerners, and inform the work of programs that are funded by governments, whether they be in governments themselves or in indigenous governments, or in arm's length or nonprofit organizations too, like the Mine Training Society, as was talked about earlier. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. Ms. Whalen Armstrong, your second question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the answer. Yes, because when working with the students, especially in the small communities, I'm speaking mostly for small communities because that's where we lack a lot of program and services. We are at disadvantage compared to a larger regional center. And that's where our young people are suffering. And when the mine closed, we're going to have a lot of young people or a lot of people with truck driver's license, like maybe class 1 and class 3. And it would be nice if they can do, instead of class 1 and 3 only, it would be nice to see other driver's license, like maybe to drive, class 1, it's only few, can have class 1. I understand that. But for ambulance drivers and all those other skills, because life after mining, a lot of communities can use those skills, work for other organizations, work for the government. That's what I'm asking about these, is that it should be more. And we know that things are changing, progressing. Young people's mindset is kind of changing a bit, that I am aware of. They're more motivated, and so and they're goal-driven, some of them. So, but it's just that we need more support for our school, because for life after high school, life after mining, we need to focus on those things. And what I would like to see is that, because ECE and ITI, they're all involved in this, that I would like to see more of them in the schools talking to the young people, because especially with ITI too, because there's a lot of young people that are talking about starting up their own business. And with the indigenous business, we're talking about contractors. So, you know, and what I would like to see is that more of these, indigenous contractors, I would like to see them working part of the remediation. So it would be nice to see more of ECE and ITI traveling, talking, you know, going to the schools and promoting their program and services, and, you know, it's just that it would be nice. It would be good because so our young people can benefit and go on to post-secondary and do more than what, you know, that what's being offered in the north. And I know that with the Polytechnic University, I know there's lots of, I don't want to say much about it because everybody has different view, but it would be nice to send kids other places for them to see other than just life in the north. And, you know, so I just want to express that, just tell the ITI, ECE, and ENR to go to small communities and promote the kind of jobs that will exist after life after mine, when the mine closed, and life after high school as well. You know, thank you.
Thank you for that, Jane. Mr. Saturnino, would you like to comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'll touch on the ECE part, and perhaps I'll allow Dr. McEachern to speak to the ITI regional engagement. I mentioned earlier, we have career and education advisors throughout the Northwest Territories. They are in the regions. They do visit individual communities and schools. We also have career development officers that are all in all of our regions. So we have about 30 staff in ECE whose jobs are to go out into communities, go into schools, talk to youth, talk to residents, provide career counseling, provide information around what opportunities are available, direct them to resources and supports to help them in their in whatever they might choose to pursue, and that does include trades as well. So MLA Whale Armstrong mentioned trades. I mean, there have been many trades that have been, or people have completed trades through the mines in a variety of areas like heavy equipment and instrument mechanics, millwrights. We've had many electricians, we've had plumbers and carpenters even in the construction stages, welders. We've, you know, quite a lot of activity, and the mines have produced quite a lot of skilled people over the years. So we do have people that are available to go into communities and into schools. I would put one caveat that I think that, you know, everybody wants to get into the schools and wants to get in front of youth, and in order to do that, organizations do need to work with the education bodies. You know, there are requirements for a certain amount of instruction to be completed in schools, and you know, these are not part of general curriculum. So, you know, those are the discussions that can happen with each education body to try and get, you know, if it's things around industry, lots of people from industry, the mining sector, for example, Chamber of Mines would love to get into schools and talk about opportunities. So, but we do have people that are in schools and in communities and available to provide that support. And perhaps I'll pass it over to Mr. McEachern for more around ITI.
Thank you for
Mr.
that,
Chair.
Mr. Saturnino. Mr. McEachern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so ITI, also we have some program work that takes us into communities. One is the Resource, Energy, and Development Information Program, which is essentially in a sort of trade show format where we bring together experts from a variety of organizations that are participants in the resource sector in one way or the other. including regulators, both the boards as well as GNWT departments or federal departments that have a role in managing and overseeing resource development in the north, as well as ourselves at ITI, speaking about the economic opportunities and benefits associated with resource sector activity. And anytime we go into a community with the Ready trade show, it is an opportunity to engage with youth. I mean, of course, everyone in the community is always welcome at these events, but we make a special effort to invite teachers and their students to come in and learn about the sector, both opportunities in the sector as well as how the sector is responsibly managed. Another program that is a partnership program with the organization Mining Matters, which actually goes into schools and has curriculum material to build students' awareness of things like geology, starting with the science and then also into mining and how that's work and how it's managed. And it's very hands-on, so kids can actually, play with the rocks and it's get the experience with the sorts of tools of the trade in the sector. And so that's been successful over the years. Admittedly, there was a bit of a hiatus during COVID. It did provide the opportunity to develop some online material, which of course can be used when people can't get into communities in person, but certainly we will be seeing more in-person activity, both from that program as well as our other programs like Ready, now that COVID is predominantly under control. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ms. Whalen Armstrong. One other question.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I heard ECE or, somebody mentioned about the 30 jobs that exist at the ECE. And here in the small communities, we're calling for, more employment for our people. And I just want to know if, the small community will really, really benefit from those 30 positions in small communities if we have those people in our regions, in our community year-round. Our young people can benefit from them instead of only coming once a year, twice a year, or, but if they were available at all times, our young people can access the program and services and, that's available over there. So I just wanted to ask, I don't know if it's up to these people, but I know it's something that we need to push later too, is that to decentralize more jobs to small communities. And these career development positions, well, it's going to benefit. I know that it's going to benefit a lot of small communities, especially with the high school and all that, because with the trade show, in our community, I know in our school before COVID, we used to have trade show, and our young people really benefited from that. A lot of them made good decisions about their future, and because, like you said, geologists were there. There's all kinds of other post-secondary. They were there, and a lot of private businesses, small businesses, large corporations, they were all there and gave a lot of good advice. So these trade shows, I know it's beneficial, but what the disadvantage for the trade show, it's going to work. I know it works good in a larger center, but what about the smaller community? So that's where that disadvantage, and I think that's where these jobs will come in handy, will help the young people. So I just want to ask, I know the minister is not there, probably not there. Sorry about that, but it would be nice if the Department of ECE can promote or can, transfer some of those positions to small communities. That's what I would like to see, but it's just that can it be encouraged over here, and then they can do their report and then tell the ECE that, I think we need to have more of these jobs situated in the small communities where our young people can benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Whelan Armstrong. Dr. McEachran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll ask Mr. Saturnino to take this one for us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Saturnino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the MLA Wyalen's passion for this area, and appreciate the opportunity to maybe share a bit more information around the structure or the supports that we do have available. So the positions that I mentioned are positions within ECE that are predominantly delivering government services and programs. However, we also have financial support for communities to hire their own community employment or career development staff. I think almost every community in the Northwest Territories has a local person. We understand that having a person on the ground, full-time is, much more effective than, somebody traveling in and out. So we do provide financial support to communities, whether that's a community government, a hamlet, a band, to employ a local person. And we do fund most communities in the Northwest Territories. There are a few exceptions where Indigenous governments are solely funding positions, which is the case in the Clecho region. However, many of our communities do access funding through us to be able to create these positions on the ground. One other comment I'd make around the things like career fairs. A lot of those activities did stop during COVID. However, in discussions with our regional superintendents, it's quite clear those activities are back up and running. There have been career fairs being held in many communities around the Northwest Territories. This tends to be a busy career fair season right in the spring. And I'm aware that, these types of events have been organized and offered in many communities, and we have a lot of partners that are coming in and providing information and trying to pique the interests of youth. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saturnino. Next on the list, I have Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll just start with some high-level comments. I don't have a lot of concerns with what Canada's doing. I mean, they just quadrupled the cost of Giant Mine. It's hard to be too mad at them. And I know that there is genuine effort on the Great Bear Remediation Project to work with the Indigenous government, and they got a couple hundred sites in the queue, obviously much smaller in scale, but it seems that there is money and work to flow here. And I don't have a lot of concerns with the diamond mines. I think there's a lot of goodwill on their part to make sure their workers, survive this transition. They seem to be willing to retrain them. I think the GNWT just really needs to step up and find some sort of coordinating role to, even 6 months off for a lot of those workers is devastating for those families and for the decades of work that we put into, training those communities and that those Indigenous Dev Corps and IBAs have gotten for their citizens. So, I think we have a good opportunity where there's decades of work here, and then there's lots of workers that we have to transition and retrain, and hopefully it lines up. And I see that as GNWT's role. So those are just some high-level comments. My one area I think I would be most concerned with would be Norman Wells, and that's I'm not sure Imperial has that same level of goodwill. And it's obviously not a federally backed site, or it's not like Giant Mine where the feds are doing the work, so they're not going to just throw unlimited money at it. And I'll start in the way of a question. Can someone just tell me if we have kind of a timeline for Imperial Oil's remediation now, and or a cost estimate, or when we would expect those? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Go ahead, Mr. McEachran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the question was specifically about Imperial Norman Wells, but before we get to that, the member did mention something that I wanted to touch on, and that is the sort of GNWT role associated with transition for NWT workers around mine closures. You know, we take this very seriously, and it's an active conversation at our socioeconomic agreement implementation tables. It's definitely been part of the conversation for the broader SEA program review with the mines, and specifically, and for example, with Diavik and, you know, Rio Tinto, the owner of Diavik. We're really, over the next 2 to 3 years, ramping up our, you know, the frequency of our meetings and work together in this space to ensure that, you know, the transition is smooth as possible for NWT workers, and that there will be new opportunities for them to move into. And Diavik actually has a very well thought out program for their staff to help them with this transition in terms of a variety of different pathways that they can support them in taking, whether it be through staying within Rio Tinto and moving to a different mine, or staying within the mining sector and moving into projects that are active or will be active soon as they move into construction. You know, Giant Mine Remediation Project is one example, but we have other advanced mineral projects that are moving towards final sort of investment or construction decisions, like Prairie Creek, as well as Pine Point and others. So these offer opportunities for the workers, or some folks may want to take early retirement or start a business, and so there are entrepreneurial supports, and we of course have programming at ITI, such as our SEED program, that supports entrepreneurs in this regard, or people may want to pursue retraining and get into a new career as well. So multiple pathways, and certainly GNWT is going to continue working closely with the mining companies to ensure that transition works for our northern workers. On the Imperial Norman Wells question, Mr. Chair, you know, we're not sure yet on the timeline, i.e. when exactly the Imperial Norman Wells oil field and associated facilities will close, given that they are still producing, and so, you know, we'll continue to monitor that and continue engaging both with Imperial as well with as Sawtooth governments and stakeholders on that subject. And so similarly, same thing with the cost estimate. We don't know the exact cost that it will be ultimately, but we'll continue to seek that data from Imperial as their closure and reclamation plans firm up. And we do anticipate that there will be an environmental assessment required associated with that work. It is, you know, clearly going to be a long-term effort and a long-term remediation economic opportunity. Certainly that's a pretty big one, so it's definitely on our radar. And I think definitely in the years ahead, that collaboration work will ramp up, you know, between Imperial, Sawtooth Secretariat Incorporated, and then of course district, land corporations and community governments, Government of Canada, etc. So definitely it's something we'll be ramping up on. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'll note, committee was in Norman Wells. We met with the various parties. Imperial is actually committed to providing us a bit of, you know, their timelines and where they're at as committee. And I guess I appreciate what you're saying. And if this goes through environmental assessment, a lot will come out and a lot of work will be done. But I think it's a project that's going to require some politicking, and I'm happy to see that this committee exists. And so I would just encourage, this committee to take a role of a meeting with those parties earlier than, we know even with, what they're going to do with the waste has caused some political pushback. We've heard from the town that, they're really looking for a long-term legacy project for Norman Wells. Imperial's been there 100 years, and they, when they leave, they want some sort of legacy project, whether that's a new infrastructure or, some sort of endowment fund, or, there's different ways that's looked. But I just think this is one that we're going to have to keep our eye on for years to come to make sure that Imperial does its part. So I encourage this committee to, reach out, and I think this is probably about the right level to do it, at the ADM level, to make sure all those parties are talking and it doesn't go off the rails. I don't need to get into bashing Imperial Oil right now, but they don't have the same incentives. This is the government of Canada, and it's not progressive reclamation like the diamond mines. It's 100 years at once of God knows what is, and how you take those wells out of the river. That there's a lot there to sort out, and obviously that will happen through the EA, but it'd be with a little maneuvering. I think it may not be a political fight for decades. It could be a model project, hopefully. So those are just some comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you for the comments, Rylan. Mr. McEachran, would you like to take a shot at it, or if not, we'll move on?
I think, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that there's definitely going to be meetings of the parties on this one in the months or years ahead. Clearly, I think you're right, Member Johnson, in that, there could be broader opportunities here. You talk about a legacy project, and, the GNWT was also involved in a sort of creative exercise looking at reimagining closure for the diamond mines, and where that ultimately leads is to be determined. But at least asking the question is useful as to what could be done with the assets from these larger remediation projects that can lead into new opportunities for the people in that region. So we'll certainly be reaching out to the parties, whether it's through this committee or some other mechanism at GNWT. We'll sort that out, and look at ensuring that benefits to Northerners are maximized from the work that will be happening at Imperial Norman Wells on the socioeconomic side. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. Next on the list, I have Mr. O'Reilly.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I guess one of the questions I have is whether this action plan or this work on remediation economy is going to look at legislative barriers, policies, and I think my colleague from Cam Lake started to get at procurement as well. And I'm just going to give one example. Cameron Hills, environment, well, I guess it was Lands or whatever you want to call them now, issued a contract to an Alberta company, Environmental Liability Management, Inc., for $15 million to remediate the site. There's not one person from the NWT working there. It's in the Northwest Territories. There's no procurement happening in the NWT. This is a government contract, and it was foreseeable. Like, we knew this was going to head our way. Orogo, imposed maybe a deadline in terms of cleaning up some of the abandoned wells that maybe forced this a little bit sooner than we would have liked, but this was anticipated. Here, a government project, like, why, I doubt that there's any requirements built in there for apprenticeships, training, nothing, I'll bet. I haven't seen the documents, but I had to ask the minister on the floor because it hasn't been really disclosed or talked about publicly in any way. So anyways, there's an example of a government project where we could and should have insisted on some northern benefits, and I don't think we did. I also think about Ptarmigan Mine down the road here, which is, the subject of probably, 10 or maybe even 30 years now of negotiations on who's really responsible for remediating the site. Well, there seems to be a little bit of money now that GNWT has acquired to do some work on the site. Here's another opportunity for us to, get some concrete training opportunities on a small scale project to start to build the skills inventory for the bigger projects like Norman Wells. And maybe that should be directly negotiated with YKDFN and Denton Cho as a pilot project. So anyways, are we going to be looking at opportunities, policies, legislative barriers to improve benefit retention as part of this work? Because we're not doing very well, even as a government, on this benefit retention in terms of remediation, in terms of even our own contracting. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly. Dr. McEachran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll touch a bit on this and then ask Mr. Canagan to speak to the accepted sites in Ptarmigan, inclusive there. Member raises a very good point on the need to increase procurement of northern businesses, or frankly the capacity of northern businesses in this type of work, so that they can be part of procurement processes and be successful in bidding and winning on these types of projects. So it is definitely a key theme for us as a government. And there has been work on a procurement review done by GNWT that will inform those procurement processes by GNWT to increase northern procurement and to really understand any barriers in that regard for these different types of projects. So that's definitely going to inform future programming and operations. Now, on the topic of the accepted sites, I'd ask Mr. Canadan to comment there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as committee is likely familiar, we haven't determined responsibility for the accepted sites between the GNWT and Canada at this time, and that's the subject of current negotiations. Recently, the GNWT proposed a phased approach to the accepted sites, the first phase being finishing up assessment work and human health risk assessments. The second being a regulatory phase, the third, the remediation itself, and then the fourth, long-term monitoring. And so the stage where we're at right now is the first phase. And so we've negotiated an MOU with Canada in which they're providing funding for the GNWT to procure the services in order to do those assessments, and also some care and maintenance work at the sites, particularly at Ptarmigan Mine. We're well aware of the interests to ensure that Indigenous governments are afforded training opportunities and benefit retention for Northerners, and definitely want to be supporting those. With this first phase of work, we went through the GNWT procurement process, and we're looking for Indigenous businesses or Indigenous partnered businesses to apply through that process. And I think we'll be having more conversations with Indigenous governments as we move forward in order to try to get that interest for the next phases of the projects. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that, Mr. Johnson, Mr. O'Reilly.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I guess I would hope that even for a project like Ptarmigan, that we would look at a negotiated approach, as has been done for the Great Bear sites. They have an agreement now. They have a process for setting priorities and making sure that there's some priority given to Indigenous, companies and so on in terms of getting the work done. And I think we need to look at using a similar approach for the North Slave region as well. But I want to go back to you've got a couple of slides. My computer's died with the timelines and some of the dollar totals and that kind of thing. And I know that at the beginning, CERNAC, I think, funded Stratos to do, and I can't remember what you guys called it, but some kind of opportunity study. When I read that, it significantly underestimated the amount of work that was, even at that point, scheduled or is required to be done. And I know that it was mentioned that that work has been updated because of even the cost estimate for Giant. But even on your slide, and I don't have it anymore, I know that there's 1,600 federal sites in their inventory in the Northwest Territories. GNWT has 278 sites in its inventory. Not all of those will be actioned maybe right away, because maybe some of them all don't present immediate risks. But even the federal sites alone, I think the money that was in the inventory to do work on those sites is like $16 billion. So I think even the figures you presented are significantly underestimated again, and the opportunities there. Norman Wells, I don't think was included. You can use a surrogate figure like their financial security, and it's lowballed at $180 million. For Norman Wells, and that's just a drop in the bucket compared to what their actual costs are going to be to remediate that site. It's probably going to be closer to $1 or $2 billion, or a hell of a lot more. In any event, I think you've significantly underestimated the opportunities here, and I wonder whether the work that you've got identified there includes all the federal sites. Does it include Norman Wells, other private sector sites? And what is the process you're going to use to kind of keep that work up to date? Because I think it still significantly undervalues the work that needs to be done. And then, of course, leaving aside the work of trying to get the federal government to maybe invest more into these sites as part of economic development. But what are you going to do to update that work and keep it current and actually reflect, I think, the true opportunities that are available here? Thanks.
Thank you for that, Mr. O'Reilly. Mr. McEachran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Absolutely. The process of, estimating the cost of these remediation projects is an evergreen process. It's dynamic. We're not ever going to really be done until, I suppose, the last site is remediated. Because people and project teams, organizations learn more about the costs as they focus their attention on a given remediation project and as it moves along its sort of life cycle. So there's not going to be a perfect answer at any moment in time, but we'll continue to use the best available information. The previous estimates used publicly available information. Which gives us, a sense of the scope and the scale. I mean, at the very least, we're trying to get, within an order of magnitude, if not down to the specific dollar and cents. But for sure, we'll continue looking at that. And as more information becomes available from various projects, incorporate them into our forecasting and communications regarding the scope of the opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that, Mr. O'Reilly. You have any other questions?
Sorry, I got to stop trying to touch the thing. Yes, I do actually have a couple of quick ones if I can, Mr. Chair. So this GNWT Canada Remediation Coordination Committee, can you give us and I don't want it now, I want a list of the members of it, and if there's a terms of reference, and whether you're open to actually having outside parties sit on this, like Aurora College, or the Mine Training Society, or I don't know. Anyways, I guess I'd like to know a little bit more about who sits on it, terms of reference, and whether there's a willingness to look at other outside membership. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Dr. McEachran, go ahead.
Yeah, we can follow up on that, Mr. Chair. Thank you. We'll provide the terms of reference, and that describes the sort of governance of the committee, and definitely willing to invite others to our meetings to see, to share information and to look at, whether or not they would like to join the committee.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. O'Reilly.
Thanks. I didn't touch it. Yeah, one last question, at least for now. And I think Mr. McEachran talked about this or mentioned it, is reporting. If you've got some kind of an action plan, which I would dearly like to see, and you've starting to develop or talk about specific targets, measures of success, performance indicators, an evaluation framework, those are all good things. But are you going to be reporting any of this publicly? Because if you don't, how does anybody know what's being done? What kind of coordination is actually taking place? Whether we're actually making progress in terms of retaining more benefits? Do we actually have a set of clear metrics or indicators? As I understand it, part of the problem with Giant is they don't have a consistent set of metrics or indicators over time that can explain how they employ Northerners, contract Northerners, Indigenous companies as well. And you need something that's going to be applied consistently across the whole sector. So there's a lot of work to be done there, but how are you going to report any of this? And is it going to be kind of on an annual basis? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly. Mr. McEachran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, there's definitely, an interest and a need, I think, from the public governments to communicate about our work in this space and to share, what we've achieved through this work in the years ahead. Admittedly, what that looks like operationally, that is to be determined, and that's something we need to further discuss at the coordination committee. So that said, clearly, communicating to any interested parties and the public in general is something that we identified right at our first meeting as something that we would need to work on and want to work on. And so, yeah, there will be more to come on the reporting front. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. McEachran. So, committee, does any other members have any other questions for the presenters? Okay, hearing none, I'll now ask members. Thank you for joining us here today. We appreciate you taking the time to provide us with the information. This concludes the public portion of our meeting. We will now take a 5-minute break before we go in camera. Madam Clerk.